All right, I'm with you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to another episode of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles, where we prefer truth over narrative and principles over politics. Got another one for you today. It's going to be pretty good. And we're going to get to it in just a second. But first, I got to remind you that LibertyNation.com is a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective with Jeff Charles. Check out LibertyNation.com for all of your conservatarian news, original articles and analysis, videos, podcasts, Liberty Nation Radio, and their signature TV program, The Conservative Five. All on LibertyNation.com, conservative news where truth matters. Now then, before I get into everything, as always, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And if you have subscribed, then please just hit that share button, hit that like button. All of that helps me out quite a bit. Also, if you want to support my work, the links are in the show notes. My CashApp, Venmo, all of that, one-time donation was perfect. Also, if you want to subscribe to my online community, you just go to afreshperspective.locals.com. And you can subscribe for $5 a month or more, depending on how much you love me and want to support my work. So I appreciate any and everything. So let's just get right into it. I know I wasn't on last week. I took a little bit of a break, but lots been going on. Too much for me to fit into one episode, but I'll probably be doing more to unpack a lot of the stuff that's going on right now. But one thing that I thought was interesting with the whole migrant crisis, we've seen how the Biden administration has mishandled this thing from the beginning, right? The first mistake they made was causing the migrant crisis in the first place by signaling to people in other countries that they would be given a warm welcome if they decided to show up at our southern border. And it's caused a whole mess. But since then, we have seen the Biden administration make a lot of mistakes, especially when it comes to unaccompanied minors, processing asylum claims, reversing almost all of the former president's immigration policies just to show that he is the anti-Trump. We brought back catch and release, essentially. And now, after the Biden administration tried to do away with the migrant protection protocols, which is also known as the Remain in Mexico policy, a judge actually, I don't know exactly how they did this, but the judge basically forced them to put it back into place. I guess the way that the White House went about getting rid of that program didn't line up with what was supposed to happen. So now they have to reinstate the Remain in Mexico program, and that's going to start next month, supposedly. And I'm sure they're still going to be fighting it. But I saw a report last week that I think gives us some insight into why the White House has handled the situation so poorly when it comes to execution, when it comes to developing strategies to deal with the problem at the southern border. And there was a report that came out. It was actually on Breitbart News, but they were actually discussing other reports detailing what's going on Team Biden when it comes to immigration. Apparently, the way his team was made up and the way that he selected the people to deal with immigration policy wasn't done probably in the way that it should have been. There's a lot of infighting going on right now. There's a lot of friction. And there's a rift between two groups of his team as it pertains to immigration. The infighting has even led some of these people to resign. So Breitbart News, they reported the quote, the political turmoil born out of the Haitian migrant caravan that gathered at a makeshift camp in Del Rio, Texas, laid bare the months-long internal rift between political appointees with vastly different views on immigration. And that is the crux of the matter. That's the problem. See, what's happening is that when Biden assembled his team, or I don't know if it was Biden himself or people that work for him, when they assembled his team to address immigration policy, they got both people who are very much open borders, who want to, let as many immigrants in as possible, regardless of their background. But then he also has a lot of moderates who want to have some border security. Now, these moderates aren't hawkish on immigration. They still, prefer to let more people in, but they do want to have border security to a certain extent. And they do want to have a better process for dealing with immigration. Like, they're not just the whole willy-nilly just let everybody in. So in September, Karen Olick, she is now the former chief of staff for Homeland Security Director Alejandro Mayorkas. She resigned last month. Also, the Assistant Secretary for Border and Immigration Policy, his name is David Shahulian, he stepped down as well. And these resignations are occurring as tensions between these two factions are reaching, well, I shouldn't say a boiling point, but it's getting there. A source told CNN that Biden's team has, quote, been operating in crisis mode since day one, and now there's another crisis layered on top of everything else. Another source told CNN that, quote, there's a sense of tiredness and that they're paralyzed by the bureaucracy. CNN also reported, quote, on immigration, there's been disagreement among moderates and progressives within the administration about how to address migrants at the border, leaving little room for solutions or decisions, according to three sources familiar with these discussions. Now, to make matters worse, in September, there was another resignation, and you might have seen this in the headlines. Daniel Foote, he was the U.S. Special Envoy for Haiti, and he resigned because of the Biden administration's, quote, inhumane treatment of Haitian migrants. And I've talked about this before, the difference between how Haitian migrants are treated and how migrants coming from South and Central America are treated. In his resignation letter, which he sent to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he wrote, quote, with deep disappointment and apologies to those seeking crucial changes, I resign from my position as Special Envoy for Haiti effective immediately. He also, in the letter, he talked about, what he focused on was, quote, the administration's inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees. And he also complained that his suggestions were, quote, ignored and dismissed. Now, according to NBC News, the State Department spokesperson, Ned Price, he denied what Foote was saying. He was denying the idea that his suggestions were being ignored. But again, sources within the Biden White House have characterized the administration's immigration policy as disjointed, as confused. It sounds like they're kind of all over the place, guys. One official told BuzzFeed News, quote, there is a complete lack of direction. And this person also continued to say, quote, everything is deferred to the White House National Security Council, which can't see past low polls on immigration and are terrified of their own shadow. Wait, that was written weird. I don't think they wrote that right. Essentially, they're saying that they're looking at low polling and that they're not really making a lot of solid decisions on immigration. Another official also said, quote, I don't know what our immigration strategy is at all. This person also said, quote, I don't know if we are building an infrastructure for the future or what direction we will be going in as we head into a midterm election year. Another source said that the White House is, quote, slowly making progress on policies for creating a more humane immigration system while maintaining some of the most inhumane policies for asylum seekers. So they might be referring to the whole kids in cages thing that they pretended to be mad at Trump about, but they're not really mad at Biden for doing it. At least some people are being consistent. They're criticizing both, but still. And in some cases, there have been inhumane policies, or at least inhumane conditions. I have talked about, especially with the children, the unaccompanied minors, being subjected to sexual abuse, to being given rotten chicken or undercooked chicken. The food that they get is not up to par. A lot of them dealing with lice in these camps. So there's some truth to, there is some truth to that. Now, another source complained that the White House is, quote, almost exclusively focused on detention, deterrence, and generally treating asylum seekers with as much violence and inhumanity as the prior administration. And that this person indicated that they might resign. They went on to say, quote, honestly, I don't know how much longer I can stay at DHS if this continues. I stayed because I believed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when they promised to build it back better. The despair I am feeling about what they are doing now is indescribable. I can't go on like this. And there was a little tiny violin playing in the background as he said these things. Now, obviously, the Biden administration is not focused on detention and deterrence the way this person is saying, because if they were, it would look a lot different. But there is a grain of truth there, because Biden is not open borders like these people are. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's an immigration hawk. He favors a very lax immigration policy, but he's not lax to the point that he just wants to let everybody in, like an AOC type or another far leftist. I mean, under the Obama administration, they deported a lot of people. So Biden comes more from that world, but he's in a position to where he can't really make the far left happy, which translates into other issues as well. Because the fact is, while he has gone further to the left than he has been before, again, he's not on that Bernie Sanders type of level. But the reason I found this interesting is because one of the things that I've been looking at with this whole migrant crisis as I've been following it is the ineptitude and the failure to come up with an adequate strategy or an adequate approach to making sure that this issue gets dealt with. And that has been a disaster. And now we know why, right? Because if these reports are accurate, and I do think they are, his team is not the members of his team are not on the same page. Now, here's the thing. Under Trump, whether you like his immigration policy or not, they were on the same page. They were on the same page in terms of messaging. They were on the same page in terms of what they wanted to accomplish. They wanted to limit illegal immigration and, to a certain extent, legal immigration as well. Whether you agree with that or not, they knew what they wanted to do, and they had an idea of how they wanted to do it. So I don't think that there would have been this level of infighting under Trump's team. There wouldn't be all this bickering. I'm sure there were disagreements, but the problem is that Biden put people on his team whose views on immigration are diametrically opposed. I mean, just because the moderates wouldn't be as tough on immigration as, say, a Republican would or a conservative would, does not mean that they are for open borders. There are a lot of people on the left who do see immigration as an issue, and they don't want a whole lot of illegal immigration. They might want to increase legal immigration or do something like that, but they're not trying to have open borders. And those two philosophies are in direct competition with one another. They cannot coexist together on the same team. And I get that when you have a team, you got to have diverse points of view. But on an issue like this, you need a core group that has more agreements than disagreements. Otherwise, you're not going to get any viable policy. If a moderate comes up with a policy that says, okay, this is how we're going to decrease the number of migrants coming to the border by telling them not to come or telling them to come the right way, here's this policy for that. But then the open borders people are going to say, no, we don't want that because we want as many of these people as possible. It's a mess. So now I think we know why the Biden administration is handling this so poorly. Now, and again, the other thing is that before and even after President Biden took office, he did signal to the rest of the world that if migrants came to the southern border, he would roll out the red carpet. I spoke with Representative Chip Roy about this, not last week, but the week before. I got to interview him. And he said that Biden, quote, has put a giant neon sign on the Rio Grande that says, come on in and you'll get processed and be granted asylum. Now, I will say that maybe we should be glad that Biden didn't put a team together that was just full of open borders advocates, because then this situation would be a lot worse. But the fact that he chose people who were in direct opposition and aggressive, vigorous opposition to one another on immigration policy wasn't a great idea. It really wasn't. So it will be interesting to see how this situation continues to unfold as we keep going with this. I mean, the situation is getting worse. I talked a couple weeks ago about how migrants are dying on the way to America, and the sad part is that it's not going to get any better. But these people are going to continue to come. I don't think that the Biden administration will be able to deter this. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope they do get it together. But if you have a team that is, I don't know if this is how it actually works out, but let's say it's half open borders and half moderates, how can they come up with a solution? Because they have deep philosophical differences that aren't going to be able to be reconciled. So for the time being, this is how it's going to be, guys. I mean, we're going to be experiencing a lot more illegal immigration, and that's going to cause economic concerns. It's going to cause concerns with crime. And you already know, if you listen to me, you know that both legal and illegal immigration disproportionately affect the Black community. So I hope I'm wrong. Maybe Biden will get it together. Maybe after the Democrats get their butts whooped in the midterms next year, maybe they'll say, okay, maybe we need to start reevaluating some things. But for right now, it ain't looking good. But as always, I'm going to keep you updated on this because I am following it. But this next thing that I wanted to talk about, very interesting. It's about free speech on college campuses. And I came across a report talking about how students are feeling about being able to express certain political views. And it actually had some pretty interesting data when it comes to this issue. Now, as you know, freedom of expression is like the bedrock on which this nation was founded. One of the bedrocks, I should say. And it has been increasingly threatened over the past few years. We have seen the left propose enacting hate speech laws that could criminalize certain types of speech. We've seen them try to use other means to stifle people's speech without using the government, because the thing that I love about the First Amendment is that it is very hard to use the government to silence speech. You would almost have to get to a point to where you would have to do another amendment to remove some of the freedoms that the First Amendment protects. It's very hard to get around that. It doesn't mean that they're not trying, though. So don't get complacent. There are people out there who do want to use our government to suppress speech. I mean, we saw some of that even with Facebook. Now, Biden wasn't trying to pass a law or issue an executive order that would compel Facebook to censor even more information on the COVID-19 pandemic or the vaccine, but he is very much willing to use his office to apply pressure. Now, we're not headed towards, a situation that they have in the United Kingdom where you can actually get arrested for making offensive statements, but we are headed towards something different, possibly. And it's interesting how the left is finding other ways to suppress views that don't align with their ideology. I mean, you've got censorship on social media. You've got cancel culture, and we've seen some of that over the past couple of weeks with the whole Dave Chappelle thing, right? That controversy is still going on, and that special that he did was 2 weeks ago, and we're still talking about Dave Chappelle. Now, it's not working. I mean, they're not going to be able to cancel him, but cancel culture, and I'll talk about this in another video, but cancel culture doesn't just affect famous people, guys. It affects normal, everyday people like you and I. We just don't really hear about it. But I do want to talk about that a little bit more. But when it comes to cancel culture, or how the left uses certain types of societal pressures to silence people, there are several ways in which they do that. They'll go after people's finances. You've heard of certain right-wing commentators who get banned from PayPal or banned from banks and things like that. And some of these people I don't even like. I can't stand them. But at the same time, the fact that you would be willing to attack somebody's livelihood because they say things you don't like, that's scary. Because we know that the ultimate objective for these types of people is not just to go after people who are white supremacists. They want to go after almost anybody who disagrees with them. They just want to start with the white supremacists because nobody cares about them. Nobody really cares if they're not able to spew their trash online. But they're not going to stop there, guys. So anyway, let me just go ahead and get into it. So, like I said, the First Amendment makes it very difficult for opponents of free speech to use the state to silence views with which they disagree. And like I said, a lot have proposed imposing hate speech laws or, altering the Constitution. They haven't had a whole lot of luck, but they're still trying. But here's one way that I think that they plan to have I think this is a way that this is a long-term strategy. That's what I'm trying to say. What I'm going to talk about right now is a long-term strategy to ensure that progressive or far leftist views maintain supremacy in political discourse. And they're doing it by creating a repressive environment in our colleges and universities. And what they're doing is they are molding America's youth into individuals who keep their views to themselves. They are creating a self-censoring generation, guys. This is what's happening. And what I'm about to discuss does not happen on every single university or every single college, but it happens on enough of them to where we should be concerned. So last month, Real Clear Education, they released its annual college free speech rankings report. And what this report does is it analyzes all of the major universities to determine how well they promote free expression on campus. And they also do a survey of students analyzing their viewpoints on free speech and their experiences regarding speech. So the report noted this, the 2021 report noted that, quote, more than 80% of American college students in our latest survey say that they self-censor in the classroom, on campus, and online. I'm going to say that again. The report said, quote, more than 80% of American college students in the latest survey say that they self-censor in the classroom, on campus, and online. Now, this study surveyed over 37,000 students at more than 150 colleges and universities. And here's one thing that was interesting in what they found. They found that public schools tended to be better for free speech than private schools. That was a little surprising to me. Not totally shocking, but it was pretty surprising to me. I would have thought it would have been the other way around. I don't know why I thought that, but I just figured it would. So the authors wrote, quote, it's worth noting that 17 of the top 25 are public colleges or universities. Then he's referring to the top 25 colleges who are good on free speech. On the flip side, 20 of the bottom 25, the ones who are worst with speech, are private institutions. So if you're looking for a better environment for free speech, your local state university might be the best place to start your search. That just kind of blows my mind. I don't know. Maybe it's because these schools are government schools, which means that they do have to adhere to the First Amendment, and private schools may have a little bit more leeway with that. That could be the reason why. But I just thought that was interesting. Now, the study also shows that the COVID-19 pandemic has made it worse because most of the classes were being held online through Zoom. About 42% of respondents said that it was, quote, more difficult to exchange ideas online than in person. Moreover, only 40% said they were comfortable disagreeing with a professor, which is 5 points lower than when they did this report in 2020. So it dropped 5 points, and there's a reason for this. The report explains that the students are more likely to self-censor when they disagree with the professor because these classes are recorded, right? You can every word that you say in these classrooms is recorded for posterity, which means that it ain't going away. If you said it, it's preserved forever unless they delete the file, but they don't. And this is a valid fear because of the cancel culture that the hard left is using. I mean, if you're a college student and your professor, is talking about, let's say, I don't know, Black Lives Matter, and maybe you criticize an aspect of what Black Lives Matter says, or if you disagree with some of their arguments, that's being recorded. And people can come back and use that against you 10 years from now, and you lose your job for it. That's the objective here. I do think it's an objective. I do think that this is deliberate. Another issue with this whole thing, as far as speech goes, is that a lot of these universities have created what they call bias response teams. And I remember reading about this last year or the year before. It's horrible. It's like an academic Gestapo. And their objective is to encourage students to file complaints about bias that they supposedly witness. So they're encouraging students to rat each other out, to rat out other students and professors if they say something that they believe shows some type of bias against a minority group. And what these people do is they listen to see if they can hear any statements that could be construed as offensive, and then they report that to the administration, and then the administration does whatever they do. Sometimes you go through a process, or they force you to take some type of training, or sometimes they might fire you or kick you out of the school. I mean, it runs the gamut, right? And that there's no wonder that this would have a chilling effect on speech. Now, there's another study. In 2020, there were 3 professors at the University of North Carolina, and they conducted a survey of students so that they could better understand the environment on campus. And the study found that, quote, many students worry that if they express their sincere political views openly, instructors and or peers will think less of them or do something to embarrass them. And we know that this is a reality. I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, if you're on Twitter, you see social media posts about it. Yeah, I mean, there was recently a video of some guy who was in the library, and he had on like a Back the Blue shirt on, or maybe it was like a sticker on his laptop. And you had these Black students confronting them in the library, talking about how offensive they were and trying to kick them out of the library. Now, freedom of speech also means having conversations. So if they had approached them and said, let's talk about this, let's have a conversation, I would have had a problem with it. There's a difference between having a conversation and then harassing people and trying to get them kicked out and calling them racist when you don't even know them. That's dangerous. There's a way that we should be going about discourse, and this ain't it. Now, other students were worried that their opinions could negatively affect their grades. The report found that 58.1% of conservative-leaning students, quote, kept an opinion related to class to themselves at least 2 to 5 times. They've self-censored themselves at least 2 to 5 times or more. Now, among left-leaning students, only 14.2% did the same. Among moderates, 28.3% had self-censored at least 2 to 5 times when this survey was taken. Now, I'm not going to go through all the rest of the data. I mean, but to sum it up, conservative students are more likely to be concerned about being stifled for expressing their opinions, which is not surprising because who owns all of these institutions? It's the left. They are over all these things. For whatever reason, conservatives retreated from the field of academics, just like we retreated from the culture, just like we're talking about retreating from blue states. There's kind of a pattern here, isn't there? We tend to run a lot. We tend to run away when things get hard. We tend to run away when the left is doing what they do. And unfortunately, the left doesn't think this way. I mean, they will go into uncharted territory. They will go into areas where they are not really supported to try to influence people to get that support. But that's a whole different topic for another day. And I will be hammering that point home ad nauseum until it changes on the right. We need to stop running away. We need to get in there. There should be a movement to get more conservative academics in positions of authority at these universities. There's no reason why we shouldn't do it. And again, not all of these colleges are crazy like this, guys. Not all of these colleges want to suppress free speech. As a matter of fact, in the report, they do have colleges who actually do a good job with this. But what I want to focus on here is that if they are training young Americans to censor themselves, and if they are trying to make it seem as if this should be normal, and if they are trying to make it seem as if speaking up could have consequences for you, then what happens when these kids get older? When the next generations come up, these people are going to self-censor because they're being taught to. And that could create a situation where the far left does have supremacy over political discourse. I believe that this is the objective. Now, there is a good chance that this could backfire, right? You might be able to silence them when they're on campus, but what's going to happen when they graduate? Some of these people are going to say, okay, now I'm out. Well, screw you all. I'm going to say whatever the hell I want. I don't care about cancel culture. That could happen too. But we know that fear is a great motivator, right? A lot of people don't speak out, or they're afraid to voice their views because they don't want to be punished for doing so. And the left is creating an atmosphere in which this is what will happen. Before, you might have people disagree with you if you express your views. You might have people just not like you. But you didn't have to worry about losing your livelihood and not being able to provide for your family because you have certain views that people don't like. And I do think that this is what they are cultivating. So hopefully it does backfire, or hopefully people who value the First Amendment find a way to counteract this. But I do believe that this is an effort to condition young Americans to shut up and to keep their views to themselves. See, that they may not care if you have the view, they just don't want you to say it because they can't control what you think. But they do want to control what you do, right? So this is something that we should be very concerned about, especially if you have kids who are going to be going into college. And you got to check out the university. I mean, look at how they treat free speech before sending your kids there. That's the only way to combat this. I mean, can't get everybody, but still, these are things that the left does without parents knowing about it. And I think a lot of parents woke up to a lot of this stuff over the past year, especially when it comes to schools like elementary schools and high schools, because all those classes were online, which means that the parents could see what their children were being taught. That's why we have this whole push against critical race theory at school boards and other types of woke theology being taught. They got essentially these school districts got busted because of COVID, because they're not sending their kids to school where they can't see what they're being taught. Now it's at home and they can overhear it. And that's exactly what has happened. I've talked to some parents who realized and got woken up because they realized what these schools were teaching. But it's in all facets of education that the left is trying to become more pervasive. So got to look out for that. So that'll be something else that I keep an eye on, but I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that at some point. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is Joe Biden's Build Back Better agenda. But before I do that, I'm just going to remind you that you should be heading over to libertynation.com, a proud sponsor of A Fresh Perspective. As a matter of fact, you should do that right after you listen to this podcast. Now, there's a lot of cool stuff over at Liberty Nation. I love it. You can get the daily briefing, which means that you get the little email that tells you about what's being written on the site. They've got a member zone with premium content. But what you're really going to get at libertynation.com is cutting edge analysis. And I know that sounds cliche, cutting edge analysis. No, I mean it. I do. I mean, I read the news for a living, right? I live in politics. I read a lot of different sites. And, and this is true whether you're reading left-leaning content or right-leaning content, there's a lot of repetition because it's just a lot of people all saying the exact same thing. And there's nothing unique about it. It's bothersome. At Liberty Nation, you're not going to get that. You are going to get unique takes on the issues of the day. You may not agree with all of them, but they are going to make you think. And there's not a lot of sites that I can say that about on the left or the right. A lot of sites, again, they just regurgitate what other people are saying. One of the reasons why I am so nuanced is because I got my start at libertynation.com, and they don't just let you write just whatever. Like, it has to be a unique angle. You have to put some more thought into it. You have to consider history, to consider the Constitution. You have to approach it in a way that not everybody else is doing it. So when you read Liberty Nation, you're going to get something different. So definitely head on over there, check out what they got. Check out my articles on there. They're great. All right. So let's go on. There's a lot going on with this whole Build Back Better plan, isn't there? We have seen furious arguments over this, right? We have seen Senator Kyrsten Sinema get harassed over the Build Back Better agenda. We've seen at least a slight uproar against President Biden for cutting funding to historically Black colleges and universities after he promised that he was going to give them more than what they've ever had before. They cut funding for HBCUs from about 55 billion or 45 billion. They cut that down to 1.5 billion. And they may even make it to where they have to compete for that money. So they're not going to get very much from this administration at all, despite what President Joe Biden promised. But here's the thing about the Build Back Better plan. If you look at it, I mean, I think it's over 2,000 pages, something like that. And most of it is very far left progressive policy ideas. I mean, you've got the infrastructure bill, but when you look at it, you find that it doesn't have much to do with infrastructure. But I mean, part of this agenda is, granting a pathway to citizenship for 11 million illegal immigrants. You've got a lot of Green New Deal type stuff in there. You've got a lot of free stuff, of course, because this was designed to appeal to the far left progressive crowd. And the far left progressive crowd in Congress are saying that they're not going to vote for Biden's agenda unless it includes all of what they want. This is a $3.5 trillion endeavor. $3 trillion. Now, Biden says that it's not going to add to the debt. He's lying to you. Everybody knows he's lying. This is an emperor has no clothes moment. Nobody actually believes that. It is going to blow out the debt. And it's probably going to cost more than $3.5 trillion, according to certain analysts and economists. But here's the issue that Biden is facing. I mean, he put a lot of that stuff in there because he wants the support of the progressive crowd. But what's holding it up is the fact that they're not even trying to get Republicans on board with this because they know that they can't. There's no Republican in Congress who's going to vote for this bill, especially the way it's built. They might vote for certain aspects of it, but they put a lot of crap in there. And we know they do that on purpose. We know that they make these huge bills because they know that nobody's going to take the time to read it all because most people have lives. But even the people who would be responsible for enacting these laws are not going to read the whole thing. And they were going to try to ram it through, and that didn't work because people, they want to read the bill. At least some members of Congress do. But here's my thing. The Biden administration is in dire need of a win. The Democrats are in dire need of a win, not just the president, because they haven't gotten a whole hell of a lot done, guys. And Biden is mishandling everything from the migrant crisis to the economy, to the withdrawal from Afghanistan. He's doing a horrible job. And again, on Afghanistan, like I said, I wanted to defend him on that. He made the right decision. He just did it in a way that was messed up. But he's not getting much done. I mean, they passed the COVID relief bill earlier this year, and that's pretty much it. They haven't really done anything major, nothing I can think of. So they do need a win. The midterms are coming up, and they need to win right now. Like they can't wait until like a month before the midterm elections because they're still going to lose. And Team Biden has been really trying to aggressively push this because they know they need a win. Democrats know they need a win too, but they're not pushing it as quickly as Biden is. And the fact of the matter is that There is absolutely no way on God's green earth that this Build Back Better Act is going to pass the way it is right now. They are going to have to take a chainsaw to it. They are going to have to cut out a lot of the Marxist junk that they have in there, a lot of the more socialist stuff. That's the stuff that's going to go, guys. It's not going to be the more moderate policy proposals. It's not going to be the more moderate provisions in the bill. The stuff that's going to go is going to be the Green New Deal stuff. It's going to be a lot of that woke stuff that they tried to put in there. And that's the only way they will pass this. And even then, they still might not, because the far left faction in the Democratic Party is holding strong. I mean, Representative Pramila, hope I don't get her name wrong, Pramila Jayapal, she's kind of been on the forefront of this. People like her and AOC and others, they're saying, no, we're not voting for any of this stuff unless you keep all of our woke stuff in there. So there's a good chance that this won't pass and that they won't get a victory. But let's say that it does. Let's say they bring it down to $2 trillion, because that's what they're talking about right now, getting it down to $2 trillion, which, by the way, I don't think that'll fly either. They're going to have to cut that down more, especially if they want to get Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin on board. They're going to have to cut out a lot. And if they want to have any hope of getting Republicans on board, it can't be the way it is. So again, let's say they manage to get it passed, and let's say it's 1.5 trillion or 1 trillion or whatever, and it's extremely gutted. Will that really constitute a victory? Like I said, the Biden administration needs a victory. The Democrats need a victory. But will this be considered a victory? I don't know about that, because the media is going to spin it, right? They're going to make it sound like, oh, this is wonderful, best thing ever. And it will not have done what Biden promised. Biden made soaring promises. Like these were very lofty ambitions. And most of that's not going to be in there if it passes. So will this really be a victory? Is this going to satisfy people? On one level, it might, because I don't think that most Americans are far leftists. Now, the Build Back Better plan has been polling well. When they've done polls, people are not overwhelmingly supportive of it, but most Americans are supportive of it. Now, I contend it's because most people don't really know anything about it. They don't know what's in it. They don't have much knowledge of what the bill entails. And there was a survey released last week that showed that. But still, it's got support. So if they have to take a lot of that stuff out, you're going to have lawmakers who have to go back home to their constituents and telling them, hey, sorry, we had to, take a bunch of this stuff out. And what's even more tricky for Democratic lawmakers is that they know that a lot of stuff has to be gutted, but they don't know what's going to be gutted. So they can't even make promises to their constituents, because they might say, oh yeah, this provision of Build Back Better is going to help my district because blah, blah, blah. Well, they can't say that because it might get cut out. So they don't know. They don't know if they're going to be able to make that promise or not. So they are in a very tricky situation here. And if it does pass and it's not what it was promised, yeah, you can say, okay, they accomplished something. But is that going to be a big enough victory to pull them out of this hole that they're in? Because I don't think it will be. I still contend that unless Republicans manage to do something so incredibly stupid, the Democrats are going to lose in the 2020 midterm elections. That's just what's going to happen. I don't see them getting any more victories. They don't have enough of a lead in the Senate and in the House of Representatives to really ram anything through. And Biden is incompetent. So it's not going to get better. He's going to create more crises. He's going to keep messing it up. And it's not going to go well for them. So just wanted to give an update on the Build Back Better. I want to see what it looks like after they cut a lot of this stuff out. And I want to see how Democratic voters respond to that, because I think a lot are going to be dissatisfied. Even the ones that aren't far left progressives, I think a lot of them aren't going to be satisfied. So that's it for today, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Again, please like this video. Please share this video. And if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so that you'll be updated whenever I go live or whenever I upload content. But until next time, keep your minds free.